Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. But yeah, welcome everyone to our presentation. Jane and I will just be kind of walking you guys through things to look out for in high school, especially looking towards a successful college application, which I know for a lot of ninth graders is a while away, but we found that advanced planning is definitely the way to go just to maximize your chances of ending up at the college that you want to be at. So at the end of this presentation, we'll do a Q&A where you guys can submit your questions via the chat function on Zoom. In the meantime, I think everyone's camera and mics are off, but just making sure those are off throughout the presentation. And yeah, happy to answer any questions you guys might have as soon as we're done with the presentation. Okay, so I'll start off with just a little bit of an introduction about myself. So my name is Wafa. I'm a partner and senior mentor at Command. Just a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I ended up going to Yale University for my undergrad, where I studied political science. And writing has always been a huge passion of mine. And I started helping kids with their applications pretty much since my freshman, sophomore year at Yale. And I've learned a lot about the process along the way. I know there's a lot of myths and misconceptions surrounding it, so hopefully what we share with you guys today can help clear some things up.
Yeah, and I'm Jane Pritchard. I'm a senior mentor at Command. I studied English and creative writing at Princeton, as well as a concentration in visual arts, which is more of like a filmmaking background. I just recently finished my MFA, sort of Master's in Fine Arts in Fiction at NYU, where I also taught an intro to writing for mostly college freshmen. So also have a passion for writing, have been working with high school seniors and college freshmen, sort of navigating that transition for, pretty much since I graduated from undergrad as well. So happy to share what we've learned along the way.
Great, so here is just kind of an overview of what we're going to be covering today. So we'll start off with academics, which is definitely pretty much the most important part of the college process and also the high school process. We'll go over things like how to choose your courses. We'll also cover important terms like course rigor, which you may or may not have heard of yet, but is a very important consideration for a lot of top schools. Next, we'll talk about testing, which is nobody's favorite part of the process, but unfortunately still, an important facet of your college applications. We'll talk about the two main exams, which is the SAT and the ACT, and how to kind of choose which one you might want to take and also set up a timeline for that. We'll also cover the changes that have happened to testing because of COVID-19 and just things you should know going into that. After that, we'll get into an in-depth discussion about extracurriculars. So they're, a lot harder to pinpoint and nail down than academics and testing, which are, pretty numerical, whereas extracurriculars can tend to be, cover a wide scope of different topics and different interests. So we'll talk to you guys about school clubs, how to, maximize involvement in those. We'll talk about self-directed passion projects, which is a big part of what we do with our own students, and how you guys yourselves can get started on a project if you choose to do so. And we'll also talk about how to spend your summer, which is a really important part of the year, a part when there's no sort of schoolwork, and a really great time to get ahead on all college app related things.
Right. And so sort of staying at that bird's eye level, what we're talking about today, so the ultimate goal is, of course, getting into a great college. But when we say great college, we don't just mean, the top ranked school in the nation. It's more about a great college that's great for you as an individual student, and sort of being able to figure out what is that great college for you, and also, how can you best prepare to apply for it. So a couple different things might go into making a school the right one for you, and that has to do with, what might be most affordable, or what has the right program that you're specifically looking for a career goal. Also cultural fit, where are you gonna have a really great time and make like lifelong relationships with professors and with friends. And so of course, sort of the how and why for this ultimate goal The reason why you'd want to find a school that's not just, again, the name or just the ranking is because if it's the right fit, has the right program for you, it's going to be easier to graduate. Your students will feel more supported, um, essentially making more connections, having really setting yourself up for long-term success, sort of beyond college, if it has that right program for you or sets you up for a job that you're more interested in. And so, of course, as Wolf has already said, we're going to get into the how of that. And of course, we're going to talk about course rigor, so performing well in classes where you're pushing yourself, preparing for those standardized tests, and then sort of the last three on the how column are more like the holistic side of the application, so how you can really dig deep into things that you care about, both academically and sort of extracurricularly, like speaking, to develop the character, the leadership side, and sort of give back. That all these things will sort of be factors in getting into again, that right school for you.
Mhm. So thank you, Jane, just for giving that sort of bird's eye view of ultimately what is the goal. Now we're going to get into how do we achieve that goal. So we'll start off with the basics academically. So at Weehawken, these are your graduation requirements currently. So 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 3 years of social studies, 2 years of U.S. history, 3 years of science, and then 4 years of health and PE. So this is an amazing kind of foundation for your education. To kind of just build on this, and something that we recommend that all of our students do, especially if you're aiming high for college, is that you take your core subjects, so English, math, science, history, and language, foreign language, each of your 4 years of high school. And the reason for this is that a lot of schools, a lot of colleges, once you get on campus as a freshman, will have certain requirements that encompass these core subjects. So they'll want to know that you sort of pursued all these subjects all 4 years, so that you can kind of come in fully prepared once you get to campus. And so if there's an option to either completely finish taking Spanish, for example, your junior year, but you have an option to, take an advanced like AP Spanish or like an advanced level Spanish in your senior year. We definitely recommend that you do that because a lot of schools do ask that you continue, core subjects like foreign language once you get on campus. That was the case for me with Yale. They asked that I did continue my language studies once I got on campus. And so just something to look out for in terms of just, sort of the graduation requirements and things to, as you get closer to your junior and senior years and you kind of have more control over which classes to take, just kind of keeping in mind that your core classes are something that you should aim to take all 4 years if you have the choice. So next is course rigor. So for top schools, this is one of the most important considerations. And just to kind of give a definition of course rigor, it basically means that you're taking challenging courses that prove you are ready for the rigorous academics in college. Um, and so over 31 AP and honors courses are offered at Weehawken, and we definitely recommend that you take advantage of these opportunities, so long, of course, as you can handle it. Um, Ultimately, a lot of top schools, the academics there are going to be a lot tougher than the sort of like basics at high school. And so they want to know that you are pushing yourself. You're taking classes that you enjoy, but you're also, taking a little bit of a challenge in terms of your academics. Not necessarily overwhelming yourself, but showing that you are prepared for the more rigorous academics that you'll face in college. And ultimately, you guys at Weehawken won't be compared against like every student in New Jersey State or like in the Northeast. You will be compared against the other kids at Weehawken. And so, this is just something to keep in mind at Weehawken on your school profile, which all colleges get. It does say that 3 to 5 AP or honors courses are considered very rigorous. So just keeping that in mind as you kind of have more options to take more APs, maybe as you get into your sophomore, junior, senior years, it's definitely a great opportunity, especially if you are aiming high for college. And just one kind of note on course rigor. we definitely don't recommend that you pursue course rigor at the expense of your grades. So for example, let's say, you're a junior, you're taking pre-calculus and you're kind of struggling through it. It's taking up a lot of your time and effort just to, maybe get a B in the class. It might not be the best idea to sign up for AP calculus because that being an advanced class is just going to take up even more time, and that ultimately could be a detriment to the rest of your courses and your grades and your GPA as a whole. So what we recommend is for you guys to prioritize courses directly related to your interest or your potential college majors. Um, so for example, just to give you guys like some personal insight into this, I was definitely more humanities based in high school. I really performed well in my history, my English classes, foreign language. But in terms of my more STEM related classes, they were a bit of a challenge for me, and so I didn't necessarily sign up for AP biology, AP calculus, all these courses because I kind of knew if I did sign up, it was going to take a lot of time and effort just to get a decent grade in that class. Whereas if I kind of, pushed my APs all onto the humanities subjects, not only would I enjoy those classes a lot, but I would end up performing better in them. So that's just something to keep in mind. You don't need to, when we say course rigor, that doesn't mean like every single class you take should be an AP or honors course, unless of course you can handle it. But the best way to go about it is to kind of focus them on your intended interest or your intended major. Um, so that's just one thing to keep in mind. Don't pursue course rigor at the expense of your grades because that could end up backfiring. And just one more note as to the courses that you guys are offered. You guys have the AP Research and AP Capstone course available to you at Weehawken, and we recommend that you guys take advantage of that because just from our experience with our own students, it's a really cool educational opportunity that isn't available everywhere. And the fact that you get to create your own research project, work with a teacher to kind of develop this sort of like niche subject. It's definitely something that colleges like to see because it shows initiative and intellectual curiosity, and also mirrors the kind of work that you might be doing in college as well. So that's just another thing that shows them that you're prepared for the sort of academic challenges you'll face in college.
Yeah, so in addition to, of course, choosing the right classes and pursuing course rigor in your interests, another factor in setting self up for success, not only during high school, but for college applications, is building strong and authentic relationships with your teachers. Not only is it, of course, rewarding, it can help you thinking, again, about that long-term goal of getting really strong letters of recommendation. So when high school teachers ultimately write those letters of recommendation, if you have a close relationship with that teacher, it's going to probably be a much stronger letter of recommendation. The kind of things that they are meant to touch upon are, what kind of student are you, giving like real examples or stories of, sort of the impact you've made on the classroom or your interests or the kind of learner you are, kind of how you've contributed to the culture of the school. And obviously, for a teacher to write a really strong letter helps if you know them really well. So I know a couple different ways you can try to get to know your teachers would be, of course, if you're struggling with any academic topic, even sort of regardless, you should always be going to get extra help when you can. It's a good way to have a one-on-one meeting to sort of build that dialogue between you and your teacher about potential areas you might be struggling with. But it doesn't also have to be, only more of like a when you need help. I think a really strong way to make an impression on a teacher would be to spend a bit of extra time outside of class asking questions about topics you're just curious about. I'm sure, I guarantee, like any teacher would be very, very thrilled to hear that you've really taken an interest in something you're reading or a topic you're learning about and want to know a little bit more. So it's a good way, again, to just start those conversations and also show the kind of learner you are and the student you are. So when it comes time um, around, senior fall, that you're asking those potentially junior year teachers who've had, or sophomore year teachers, or teachers sometimes you have more than one class with, those like longer, more meaningful relationships. When you're asking them for those letters, they'll have a lot to go off of. So it's an important thing to set yourself up with teachers in that way.
Okay, so now we'll get into a discussion about testing. So As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, standardized testing has always been a part of the college admissions process, though because of COVID, this did change slightly over the past year, and we'll get into that shortly. But just to kind of start with the basics, the two main exams that are going to be available to you that colleges would like to see a score from are either the ACT or the SAT. We always get the question, like, is there a big difference between these two exams? Is one of these exams, more preferred by colleges? And the answer for that is no. Both of these exams are weighed exactly the same. We've had many students get into top schools with, both of these different kinds of scores. So there is no exam that's preferable, but they are different in nature. And just to kind of, give a brief overview of how they are different. So the ACT generally tends to have simpler questions, more straightforward, not really like tricky questions at all, but there's a lot more of them, which means that just time wise, it might be a little bit more stressful. Whereas with the SAT, there's fewer questions overall, but the wording on the SAT can tend to be a little bit tricky, confusing sometimes. So the SAT is a lot more about reading each question carefully and really understanding what you're being asked. So that's kind of a brief overview of the difference of those exams. And generally, students tend to gel with one exam better than the other. So a good first step here would be to take a diagnostic exam for both of these exams during your sophomore year to find out which is a better fit for you. And so what a diagnostic is basically is just, finding a practice past ACT, past SAT, which you can either find online or in a workbook. And just sitting down in a place where there's no distractions, you don't have your phone on you, you're sitting at a desk, and you're timing yourself according to the time limits of these exams, and they are quite long exams, like a few hours each, and so it is a big time commitment. So you might not want to take both exams on the same day, but that's really the best way just to kind of know which exam is going to be a better fit for you. Is just to sit down and really see how you feel after each exam. If the ACT just was too fast for you, like too stressful time wise, then maybe the SAT is a better choice. Um, so, like I said, no exam here is more preferable. It's all about which one you gel with better. And taking a diagnostic your sophomore year, if you wanted to take one, towards the end of your freshman year or even the summer after your freshman year, that's totally fine as well. But sophomore year, we think that that's a good time. Just sit down, take these diagnostics, and just kind of, step one, figure out which exam I want to take. So now just a discussion about the changes that have happened to testing because of COVID-19. So, as I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware, COVID-19 shut down a lot of things, and that definitely applied to testing as well. So a lot of our students, who had signed up for SATs, they were juniors, seniors, wanted to get that out of the way, ended up just not being able to make the exams at all because, either testing centers were closed or there was, such a limited capacity that the nearest testing center was hours away from them. And so obviously that presented a lot of changes to colleges. And neither the SAT or the ACT went online or digital. They kept them as in-person exams, which also did complicate it a little bit further. But colleges did recognize, this challenge, and they announced two different policies. So the first one would be test optional. So pretty much every single school went test optional. And basically what this means is exactly what it sounds like. Colleges said that you could submit a score if you have one, but if you don't, to just submit your application anyway, and that you wouldn't be at a disadvantage. So, for example, like a school like Harvard, who has always required an SAT or an ACT score, pretty much for the first time ever, said you didn't really need to submit one. So, that also meant that a lot more students applied to these schools because you didn't really need to submit a test score. So, that's test optional, is pretty much what it sounds like. And then test blind is another policy. It's a lot more sort of, in depth in terms of, acknowledging the difficulties to take a test or to get your score. And so test blind means that a school just won't consider test scores at all. There's no place to report it on your applications. They don't want to see it. They won't consider it. And one major school system that did this was the University of California school system, and they still are implementing that today, actually. So, UCLA, UC Berkeley, those schools have gone fully test blind, which means they won't be accepting any test scores. Um, Another thing that happened was the cancellation of the SAT subject tests. And so the SAT subject tests, or SAT 2s as they were also known, were shorter exams. They were about 60 minutes, and they were in a variety of subjects. So, math, history, US history, world history, the languages, literature, various subjects in science. And these were weighed heavily by colleges. And we would recommend that our students would take, 2 or 3 of these exams if they really wanted to be competitive. But pretty suddenly last year, the College Board just said they were all canceled. So we had students who were preparing and obviously didn't end up taking those exams. And this is the first application cycle where this policy is in effect. So we kind of have to wait and see how it shakes out. But what we're kind of predicting is that similar subject-based exams, so AP exams, for example, might be weighed a bit more heavily now that SAT subject tests are not a thing anymore. And the reason for this mainly is because the SAT subject tests were liked by colleges because they sort of mimic the type of exams that students would take in college. Not like a general exam like the SAT, but a more focused exam on one subject, which is similar to college finals. So those aren't a thing anymore. You don't have to worry about preparing for those, but just kind of looking out towards like APs and exams you might take that are subject based in the future. Those might be looked at a little bit more closely because of this cancellation. Um, and so, looking at the admissions statistic from the past cycle, the we with test optional, I mentioned earlier that schools said you wouldn't be at a disadvantage if you didn't submit scores. But what we found when we kind of looked at the data was that the vast majority of students who were admitted to top schools did have strong ACT or SAT scores. So while there was a small sort of percentage of applicants who were admitted without test scores, overall, it did kind of look like you were at a disadvantage, at least at these, really competitive schools, if you didn't submit a test score. Um, so basically, what this means for you guys is that even though you might be seeing test optional, that label on a lot of schools that you're interested in, the fact of the matter as it stands right now and as we've observed is that if you are aiming for top schools, you do need to have a strong ACT or SAT test score. Um, because at the end of the day, at this point, if a candidate with the exact same kind of profile as you, similar grades, similar extracurriculars applies, and they have a strong test score and you didn't submit any test score, it's likely that the school will admit the student with the higher test score, because that is something that colleges still do like. And unless a school is test blind, like fully test blind, like the UC system, for example, you are going to want to just plan for taking one of these exams. So in terms of a timeline and how to kind of plan out taking these exams in high school, we definitely recommend that you give yourself time to prep and take the tests multiple times. Of course, it's ideal if you just take it once and get it over with, but usually students do end up taking it more than once, maybe 2 or 3 times. And that's totally normal with maybe the first sitting just kind of almost like a practice run, just seeing what the testing environment is like. Um, so we definitely recommend that you give yourself time to take the exam multiple times. We also recommend that you aim to complete your testing by the end of your junior year, just because really the summer after junior year tends to be pretty intense, and that's when we like to kick off the college application process and start writing essays. Also, your senior fall semester grades are still super important. Your colleges will still want to see those, so you want to make sure that your grades aren't slipping senior fall with all the applications and all the senior work. And so aiming to just have all your testing kind of out of the way by the end of your junior year is definitely a good goal to aim for, and you will thank yourself during your senior fall if you do end up managing to do that. So next is a PSAT. So the PSAT is basically the preliminary SAT, which is taken during your sophomore and junior years. And we get a lot of questions about the PSAT, like, does it matter? Will colleges see my score? And in terms of that question, will colleges see my score? The PSAT scores are not considered or requested by colleges, so they won't really appear anywhere on your college applications. However, we do recommend still preparing for this exam. There's a few neat outcomes that could happen if you do end up scoring highly, namely the National Merit Scholarship, which awards you free money for college, which is, never a bad thing. So if you do, take some time just to prep for the PSAT, which is kind of like a shorter version of the SAT and mimics sort of the nature of the exam, um, not only is it good practice for the SAT if you choose to take that exam, but you could get a scholarship out of it. And that's great because it is a scholarship, but also it is a competitive scholarship, so something that colleges do like to see. So we do recommend that you do take the PSAT seriously, even though it won't really be considered by colleges. Okay, and now kind of the final note on testing is AP exams. And so, as we mentioned, because the SAT subject tests have been canceled, AP exams, which are similar in nature to the subject tests, may be looked at more heavily than previous years. So, once you get a little bit further along in your high school career and you have the option, whether or not to take an AP exam for a course, we definitely recommend that you do, because colleges, again, they like to see good standardized test scores. And you could also potentially get credit for these courses depending on how you score on the exam, which is graded out of a five. So one being the lowest you could score and five being the highest. So they can count for college credit, but be aware that many top schools do not offer credit for most APs. Um, just to give you guys a personal example, I went to school in Brooklyn and I took about, I think, 8 APs by the time I finished high school. And I found out that Yale was only going to give me credit for AP Spanish, which was kind of a bummer because I took a lot of APs. But that does tend to be the case with a lot of top schools, is that there are like very select APs that they will give you credit for. So if getting college credit out of your APs is important to you, we definitely recommend that you just check with each school that you're interested in just ahead of time and confirm to see which classes, if any, would you be getting credit for.
Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit. I feel like up till now we're talking about a lot of sort of more like the numbers based different components. So you sort of need to, have your bases covered with course selection and PSAT and SAT and ACT. But now we're sort of thinking about how does it all come together as an application, as sort of a picture of you that you're putting forward to colleges, and sort of what are they looking for when they say they're, evaluating the whole student. And so we're going to get into a little bit more extracurriculars, passion projects, things you can sort of do to stand out when it comes time to apply. So one of the first things off the bat is that there's a common misconception that colleges are looking for the classic well-rounded student who does a little bit of everything, but that is not the case. So instead, looking for a well-rounded class of unique students. So students that have something we're going to call a hook, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a second. So, which is it's a singular focus, it's a unique passion, something that they've devoted a lot of time to. And sort of on the sort of right-hand side of your screen, again, less measurable than an ACT, but impact on your community, sort of showing demonstrated care through either volunteer work or sort of applying, a skill or a passion of yours to helping others in some way or filling some sort of need. And then, of course, showing emotionally intelligent self-starters. But what I mean by that is, again, emotional intelligence is the ability to sort of have the impact on the community and, work in teams, and also self-starting. It's just hard work and showing that demonstrated commitment to something, whatever it is your particular hook is. So to get into that concept a little bit more about, what is a hook exactly. So I hope this comes as good news to most of you, that it's not like you have to sign up for 10, 15 clubs and do them all and do a little bit of everything, sports, student government, drama club. It's not that. A hook is the unique thing. It's like the one specific thing you really want to you get really excited about and you really want to dive deeply into. It's something that you pursue in a consistent way throughout all 4 years of high school. And it shows like that growth and development in a particular subject or in a particular extracurricular field. So, it doesn't have to be necessarily, an academic hook, doesn't have to be, necessarily like some students worry about it being, it's not, I don't have a hook, I don't have something super impressive I do, but everybody has, interest or a talent or something, a way that they can apply themselves to helping others or to sort of, pursuing, their interests. So how you can find your hook, and which is something you might be uh, wondering, if you don't, nothing pops into your mind. So there are three things sort of on the next slide that are good places to start if you're not sure. So like I said, some people think, oh, I don't have a hook. And, but I'm sure everybody has interests. Everyone has things they like to do. And you can really surprise yourself. Again, it doesn't have to be, oh, my hook is computer science or astrophysics, and that's how I'm going to get into college. Your hook could be that you really like playing basketball. We've had students, sort of find a need in the basketball community, which was something we'll get into a bit later. Actually, I won't spoil the example. And sort of that was their hook. They sort of spent a lot of time volunteering in sort of in an athletic capacity. Another place to find your hook if you're not sure is the potential, activities and clubs. So as a ninth grader, it's good to try out a bunch of different things before sort of settling on, what really sticks with you. And you have the luxury of your, first year of high school, figuring out what club actually seems like a lot of fun and then sticking with that, sort of going deeply into that. And then, lastly, and sort of think back, what am I good at? That can also be a place to find like that hook the interest that you develop the most. So finding your special skill set, and again, like sharing it with other people and really getting the most out of that is a potential hook. So yeah, like I was saying, extracurriculars, clubs, it's a good place to start when you're looking at not only finding your hook, but advancing it and finding places to apply it and have it not just be like an insular talent of yours or an insular focus. Like if you are really interested in coding, we've had students who learn coding, on their own online, and there's a lot of, online learning is out there. There's YouTube tutorials on everything you can think of, but actually joining a club or finding a way to bring this to the community and doing an extracurricular that involves a team is a great way to, again, enhance that hook, not just find one. So like I said, ninth grade, you can sign up for, and it's the only time you'll hear me say this, but ninth grade, you can explore, sign up for as many as catch your interest. And then by sophomore, junior year, you want to really narrow that down, and you don't have to spread yourself too thin, which is kind of the beauty of finding your hook. It's what's that one or two clubs that I really, really care about. And that also gives you, the longer you stick with one club, the more you have the leadership potential, which is really important as well for college applications to, again, show that those sort of qualitative aspects of your character that we were talking about that you want to show in the application. So getting into sort of the specifics of extracurriculars and sort of what different buckets that they tend to fall under. We'll get into each one of these on a slide following this, but you've got athletics, arts, clubs, which are sort of special interest clubs, drama, robotics, computer science, academic based like physics or mock trial, model UN, sort of different interests. There's clubs for almost all of these things. Competitions are another one, as well as volunteering, which is a big umbrella. And we can talk about, there's different ways, of course, to give back. So right, first thing would be athletics. A lot of students, sort of going into the athletic specific slide yet, a lot of students play multiple sports if sports are their thing. So the one thing to note is that if it's your number one extracurricular and you want to sort of balance that out with something else, and you play 3 sports, you can consider sort of devoting yourself to, what's my top sport or even top 2 sports that I care the most about. And if there's that third extra season that's not as important, it's a good way to sort of balance out your just sort of your time management, and you can build up other extracurriculars. But sports are also a great way to show leadership skills, sort of show that teamwork aspect, that emotional intelligence, and also just dedication, because colleges are aware that sports take up a huge amount of time and that it's a really big commitment. So it's a great primary extracurricular, as is the arts. Again, these are the aspects where you're showing sort of the unique interests you have, and it's not something that's necessarily going to come across like an SAT, and you can't really quantify it. So it's a great way to get involved in showing your creativity, pursuing either, it can be a specific like visual art, like learning of a skill, like a graphic design or computer aided design, or it can be, sculpture, anything like this, or performance art. So singing, music, any of these avenues, if that's your passion, is a great thing to go down. Another important thing though with the arts is to have some sort of formal involvement. Like again, I've spoken to students who are really passionate about drawing, and they, have notebooks and they draw at home, but they haven't really taken that next step to, okay, what can I do with this? Or how can I show my further commitment to, I really love drawing and I want to do something with this. Like I know had a student end up making sort of self-publishing a children's book with the drawings that she made. So there's different ways to, again, have a formal or sort of deepen your involvement in the arts, if that is also sort of the extracurricular path that makes the most sense for you. And so also, again, like I said, clubs, it's a pretty big umbrella. There's so many different things that fall under these, and you want to pick that activity that really speaks to your interests. And again, it aligns with like that hook. If you want to study if you want to study engineering, you might want to do a robotics club, because it's a way to show that continuity and that like dedicated interest. And again, speaking of continuity, clubs are a great place to rack up sort of leadership credit, as are sports. So it's a place where if you stick with a club, you can potentially run for secretary and show again that extra level of involvement that really matters in the end, and applications to show that leadership quality. Yeah, so next are competitions. It can be a really committed extracurricular. There are science fairs and Olympiads, project-based things that you really spend months on and sort of develop for a showcase or publish research or sit for a national exam where you can really get, a medal of some sort, where that translates really clearly to colleges that you've put in a lot of time on the academic subject or the project, and that you've, committed to this competition. And it's awards with like Olympiad, for example, are very well understood and very legible to colleges that, where you're at with like that with that subject matter. So, and that's one more STEM based, or science and math. And then there are tons of really great writing competitions. Scholastic hosts one every year with many different categories. So you can write an essay on history of politics, on creative writing, or on literary analysis, and they have high schoolers from all over the world submit these papers. And winning a sort of recognition through anything like this, again, just shows like really exceptional ability. And also, like, again, that you're going above and beyond just what's happening in the classroom or what you have to learn for homework. Pursuing an academic competition just really shows that drive, and also that intellectual curiosity, which can also can be a hook. And again, math competitions, there's several as well that are very, once again, legible to colleges, because it's sort of a form of specialized standardized testing that shows your passion for the subject. So it's another route you can possibly take if that's something you're interested in. Okay, and volunteering, again, it's a big one. Giving back to your community, showing that you care, is a huge aspect of something that would matter a lot to colleges, that you're not just learning in a bubble, but that there's an aspect to your learning or to your passions that are is applied to your community. So I know that Weehawken has sort of a service club where students can all sort of get community service hours. So that's a great place to start and to sort of figure out maybe what projects speak most to your interests. I know some students were speaking about, that I've met with, we're talking about planting trees. And if, for example, if you want to study environmental science someday, this is a great way to volunteer in a way that's consistent with your interests, that builds towards that engaging hook, that sort of consistent narrative. So, or like another example of this would be if you are interested in a nursing career, maybe you get involved with the blood drive, which is something I've also spoken to Weehawken students who've done this. So there's a lot there, no matter what your hook is, there's a lot of ways to sort of apply it. If your hook is the Olympiad and you love math and science, and you've studied for the Olympiad and you realize not everyone necessarily has the resources to do that. And you can start, I know a student who started tutoring other students in the Olympiad because it's sort of special knowledge, and spread that around to other schools. So yeah, volunteering, giving back can look a million different ways, but as the main thing is that you're trying to think of or identify needs in the community, or think of ways to share something you're potentially, you have a special skill or talent or something you really care about, and sharing that passion with other people is sort of a good place to start.
Okay, so now we'll talk a little bit about summer and things that you could do over the summer just to get ahead, whether that's academically, whether that's extracurricularly. And we've kind of split it up into two buckets here. So, what would make for a compelling summer and then a non compelling summer. And just a note, so for the summer after your freshman year, so that's generally kind of like a low pressure sort of summer where, as Jane mentioned earlier, you still have the luxury of exploration. You can do different things. You don't necessarily need to stick with what you do over the summer after freshman year. But you want it to be productive, even if it ends up being something that maybe you didn't end up being a passion for you, that it helps kind of inform you for, okay, that wasn't my passion, but now I have a better sense of what actually is, so that when you get into sophomore year and especially junior year, which is for sure an important year, you are more settled into those activities. So summer after freshman year, like I said, like low pressure there, but by the time you get to your summer after your junior year, that's the time when you really want to kind of get that really great research project, or find a really cool internship, or get involved with even potentially like launching your own project. And so that's definitely something to look to sort of later on, but still as a freshman, there are a few things you can be doing. And so the first thing is a merit-based academic summer program. So what merit-based means is that it's not necessarily a program where you just like pay and you get in it. There's a program with an application, maybe some essays asking you about your interests and why you might want to join the program. So there are a lot of these available for freshmen, and these are great opportunities just to maybe take a course in a subject that you're interested in, or explore some niche topic that maybe you haven't really covered yet. So that's one great way to spend your summer. Next is taking college or online courses. So in regards to the college courses, that might end up being more of a viable option as sort of later on in high school, but in general, a lot of our students have taken advantage of this opportunity where they kind of consult with, local colleges in the area. It doesn't have to be the top universities in the nation. It could just be schools around you that are offering high school students the opportunity to maybe sit and take a class over the summer. And maybe that helps them advance, the next year. If you take that course over the summer, then you could advance into the honors version of that course your sophomore year. So it's a way to get ahead. It's also a way to explore subjects that maybe just aren't available at your high school. Um, and then also online courses. And so, platforms like edX, if anyone's ever heard of that, offer thousands and thousands of courses from professors at all the top schools, in the country, all over the world. And the great thing about these courses is they're not just covering those core subjects or the basics. If you wanted to learn a little bit about graphic design, for example, there's an online course for that on edX. If you wanted to learn more about business, starting a business, that's also something you can find online. And so you don't necessarily get credit for these courses, but they are still something that you can list, and that does show your intellectual curiosity. And again, goes back to that, potentially finding your hook, and seeing which topics you really kind of want to devote your attention to over the next 4 years. Um, Next is passion project development. So we touched on this a little bit earlier, but this is something that really makes up a big part of what we do with our own students. And Jane covered sports, arts, school clubs, volunteering, which are all amazing ways to demonstrate your hook and your interests. A passion project is a self-directed project. So basically, that's a project that you start on your own. It's not a school club, and it is a lot of work. It takes a lot of kind of legwork to get a passion project off the ground and to run it. And not every student does it, which is what makes it kind of a memorable thing if you do choose to go with it. So a passion project can really take any form. We've had students in the past do, like massive fundraisers and raise big amounts of money, but we've also had students who maybe created like a local magazine on like, the birds in the area for their community. So it doesn't have to be this like, massive thing. You don't have to get hundreds of thousands of followers on it for, on social media. It can be, the keyword there is impact. And the quantity of the impact is not as important as the quality of the impact you're making. And so, that's something that can be pursued and something that does take time. A passion project in our experience is something that really needs time to develop. It's not necessarily something you're going to want to start like the summer after junior year. And in our experience, students who start them, freshman year, sophomore year, by the time it gets to junior and senior year, they've made amazing impact with their projects and have a lot to talk about on their applications. Um, so that's a really great way to dig into your hook. Again, it's a lot of work, but it's a step by step process to kind of build something like a passion project. So something you could start doing over the summer is just starting to brainstorm what that project could be, and potentially setting up a website for it, making a logo, maybe making partnerships for it. So that's things that, if you wanted to kind of sit down this summer and potentially plan a self-directed project, um, just know that it should have a longer lifespan. It shouldn't just be kind of this couple of month thing. It should be sort of a long-term project that you are, committed to building out and putting your time and energy into. Next is working a job. So, this might come as a surprise because it doesn't sound like the most impressive thing to have had like, like a part-time job over the summer, but um, it's definitely something that offers a unique sort of, skill set that maybe other opportunities don't. So obviously, like volunteering is amazing and joining school clubs, all of those are really impactful, but having a job does demonstrate sort of a degree of responsibility that you can't really sort of demonstrate with a lot of other things. And so it does show maturity. It shows, like I've had students list like camp counselor jobs that they've had, and, being entrusted with the safety of children by adults is definitely, it shows that maturity that colleges definitely look for. So this might, again, just in terms of age, might not be super relevant for you guys for this immediate summer, but something to look out for. And just a note on that, you shouldn't necessarily pursue working a job at the expense of everything else. It should kind of be this sort of supplementary opportunity if you do have the time for it. Next is volunteering and community service. So this is definitely a great way to spend your summer. Like Jane had mentioned, you're going to want to tailor your volunteering and community service to the subjects that really matter to you. And so, for example, if you really like science and you might want to be a doctor one day, volunteering at a hospital would be a great option for you. But if you're an English major, maybe it wouldn't make the most sense for you to volunteer at a hospital. You might want to volunteer at a library, or you might want to volunteer, like maybe reading at like a nursing home or something along those lines. And so tailoring those volunteering experiences is definitely something that you should aim to do. And you'd be surprised at what opportunities are available in your community. If you see a really cool place that you might want to volunteer at, but you don't know if they take volunteers, just email them, call them, let them know if they need extra help, and then you'd be happy to help out. So definitely that encompasses kind of a wide range of opportunities. Um, Next is reading and writing. And so we are big proponents of practicing your writing skills as much as you can and when you can at command. So writing, if you dislike writing, unfortunately, it does not go away. It's something you need to do all throughout high school, and then ultimately something you need to do to get into college. And then definitely something you have to do after that. And so we think it's never too early to just start practicing that sort of writing muscle, specifically the personal writing muscle. Um, because a lot of students we find when they get to their college applications and they're being asked about their hopes and dreams and what was a challenge you overcame, and what academic subject is your favorite and why, all these personal questions that your college applications pretty much consist of. They don't really know how to go about it because they've never really practiced that kind of personal writing um, in school. And so that is definitely something that is a great thing to work on over the summer. That's never time wasted, reading or writing. And generally, strong writers tend to be big readers, and there's a reason for that. So we definitely recommend that. If there's like a Weehawken like summer book, like reading list, for example, or just even going online and seeing what cool books are out there that you might want to read this summer. That's definitely something that is really valuable. And in terms of writing, journaling is something I recommend to my students. Just putting pen to paper and really just developing their own voice and how to articulate their thoughts and feelings is really important and can also be pretty cathartic. And so that's a way just to kind of keep practicing that sort of like in a low stress way. Another way to do that is also to seek out writing competitions, like Jane had mentioned earlier. So scholarships, essay writing competitions, there's a ton of them. I applied to a few when I was in high school. And they're really good opportunities, to practice, but practice also with the aim of potentially winning an award. Um, so that's a great way also to kind of spend the summer. And next, and also again, this might be more relevant for after your sophomore year and definitely after your junior year. But summer internships and research opportunities are really, really valuable programs that you could look into. And some of these are application based. Some of these, I've had students in the past just cold email a professor and say, I'm really interested by what you're working on. I have interest in this field as well, and this is what I've done with it so far. Could I potentially help you with this project in some way? And it doesn't always pan out, but it has panned out many times in the past. And you really only need one person to say yes for you to secure a really cool internship or research opportunity. So there's a traditional route of kind of applying. There's a formal application or an essay to write, submit a resume. Then there's also opportunities that you can kind of find for yourself via cold emailing and reaching out to people. So yeah, that might not be fully relevant for the summer after your freshman year, but definitely something you could explore the summer after next year, and for sure the summer after your junior year. And so, in terms of what a non compelling summer would look like, so we'll start off with just like a primarily test prep based summer. So, this, test prep is never a bad idea. Like we spoke about with the timeline, you want to get ahead of it, you want to give yourself ample time to prepare. But if your summer is just tutoring, and that's kind of the main productive thing you're doing over the summer, it might not be the best way to kind of get closer of that goal of finding your hook and figuring out what you might actually want to, spend your time on, so that once you get to your sophomore year, you can hit the ground running, you know what your hook is, and you can kind of start tailoring things to that. Because the earlier you do find what your hook is, the better. Um, Next is long travel or a vacation. So, of course, it's summer, take your time to relax, sleep in if you want. And of course, travel with family, go on vacation. But perhaps like a 2 month long vacation might not be the best way to spend the summer, unless, of course, you're making use of that time via, let's say, like online courses or reading and writing while you're away, or even, doing some independent work, starting to trying to start a passion project. That can be a great way to make use of time if you are away and you do find yourself traveling for a lot of the summer. You do just want to make sure that you're not just spending the 2 months, not really attempting to get closer to finding your hook or developing academically or extracurricularly in some way, because there are students who will be using the summer for that, and they'll hit the ground running once sophomore year comes around. So you just want to make sure that you are making use of that time. Next is primarily sports camps. So, of course, if you're an athlete, definitely spend some time towards that, developing your skills, especially if you do want to get recruited at some point in the college process. But if recruitment is not necessarily the route that, for sure that you want to take, then you do just want to make sure that you are kind of, again, working towards that hook and what it might be. And then finally is a pay to play summer program, which is pretty much the opposite of the merit based academic summer program that we spoke about. It's kind of an opportunity that you might see online that just says, here's our tuition, here's our fee, just pay, and then, you're registered. And so while those, there are a lot of programs like that, and a lot of them can be, very informative, they're not necessarily merit based. And so, it's they're not accepting you based on how good of a fit you are or how competitive you are. It's pretty much you pay them and you get in. And there are, you know, as you see in that compelling summers column, there are a lot of more compelling ways to spend your summer. Okay, so now we'll talk about how you could potentially turn, oops, sorry, how you could potentially turn your hook into a passion project. So these three categories Jane had mentioned earlier, the passions and interests, the talents and skills, and then the activities and clubs. Um, so this is an example of a student who kind of sat down, you know, to brainstorm what her potential passion project would be, and you know, listed a few items under each of these columns just to kind of get a clear picture of what her passion project could look like. So under passions and interests, she had movies and films. So she was a big film buff. She especially loved superhero movies. And then in terms of causes that she cared about, she was very passionate about education. She really enjoyed school and she knew how important it was. So she wanted to try to make school more fun for her peers as well. Next is her talents and skills. So underneath that, she has screenwriting and editing. So it kind of ties into her passion for movies. She's kind of, you know, had some practice just developing, you know, a script and just kind of digging into that movie passion that she has. She also loves storytelling in whatever form it came in. And then in terms of other skills, web design, she had kind of started her own sort of rudimentary website, nothing too intense or too polished, but she had, you know, had experience with that. And then next was fundraising. She had done a bit of sort of like lower scale fundraising. And then in terms of her activities and clubs, she was in the drama club at school, again, kind of tied to her movie passion. She was also a member of the JV soccer team, and then was also involved in student government. Um, so as you can kind of, you know, see with these three different buckets here, there's, you know, variety there, but you can also kind of see some common threads running throughout. And ultimately, the project that she ended up with was creating a web comic with a superhero figure that encouraged young students to feel empowered in school and shows them how to find their own superpowers. And so she kind of, you know, took that web design ability, the screenwriting and storytelling ability, and merged it with her kind of interest in education and in just making school more fun and ultimately just being supportive to her peers. And so the long-term goal of this product of this was to produce a short film using the character to enter to festivals and competitions. So a goal like that is, you know, 100% achievable, but it does, you know, going back to kind of passion projects being a long-term thing, it might take a lot of time to get to that point, and you might have kind of smaller, you know, benchmarks along the way that you might want to achieve before you can actually get to that point. So this is just an example of how a student with kind of varied interests and talents just put them all together into a pretty unique passion project. Okay, so next we'll get into a few examples of some of our past students who have created really cool passion projects. So we'll start off with Christina. So Christina was interested in politics and international affairs. A cause that was really important to her was refugees in America because her grandfather had actually been one. And she ended up looking into ways to help people who, like her grandfather, kind of came to a new country with pretty much nothing and kind of had to learn how to build a life here. So she decided to take the initiative to raise money for the educational pursuits of refugees here in the United States. So it took a lot of hard work, and this was over the course of a couple of years. But by her senior year, Christina had raised over $200,000 for refugees. This money gave many families access to education, and via kind of the Passion Project, she also rounded up a really great support system for these refugees just to kind of help them navigate life in the US, specifically in regards to their education. So this is a pretty kind of, you know, big passion project. You know, we're talking six-figure fundraising, which is amazing and super impactful. But it's not every passion project takes this form or this scale. It can be something on a much smaller scale. However, if you do start freshman year like Christina did, you do have enough time to actually achieve those big goals. So just something to keep in mind here. Next, we have Jordan. So, Jordan was passionate about civic engagement and politics, but she noticed that not many schools in her area taught their students about government or the importance of voting. Um, Aside from that, she was also curious about computer science, coding, and machine learning. She was a little techie, and so she wanted to figure out kind of how to merge those two passions within politics and tech. So her sophomore year, she started a news app with student-written articles about current events, social justice, and legislation. And ultimately, Jordan got students from other high schools in her area to contribute articles as well. She also created a curriculum and began teaching workshops about civic engagement at middle schools. Lastly, she used her machine learning skills to develop a fake news algorithm to prevent the spread of false information. So you can kind of see here still an incredibly impressive project, but not necessarily like raising hundreds of thousands of dollars. She kind of used her skill set and her interests to make this impact, not only in her own high school, but getting students from other high schools to contribute is always an option with your passion project. You can really build kind of a community that way. Um, yeah, and the fact that she really kind of used her tech skills, her coding skills for developing an algorithm. Again, that didn't happen overnight. It definitely took some time for that to come to fruition. But these examples are just kind of here to show you the things that you could achieve with sort of the right planning.
Yeah, and this is the example that I almost brought up earlier, but I didn't want to spoil it. So, example of Greg is the student who is really interested in basketball. So that athletics is more sort of sure. Is it a good example of how you can use athletics, your interest in a particular sport, finding like a way to apply that interest to giving back in some way. So, the student was playing a game of pickup basketball after he was tutoring at a low income school, and he realized that students didn't have the proper sneakers. So, it's not just a matter of like fashion, or they're not like nice sneakers. It was that they were like not the right support for playing basketball, which anyone who's ever played basketball knows can be very dangerous, not great for your ankles. So he realized that this wasn't, again, not safe, and it's something that he felt he could do something about. Um, and this is a really good example of a project that relies on networking and sort of doing that cold emailing. I know we spoke about this earlier with maybe summer internships and cold emailing professors, but never underestimate the power of cold emailing. A lot of people, you never know who the email might find and who might actually be willing to help you. So in this case, the student emailed dozens of executives at different shoe companies, pitched what he wanted to do. And he got, in this case, it's not like it's always going to work out. In this case, amazing outcome. A Nike executive donated 500 pairs of shoes for the cause. So that went to a school in a low income area. So students had the proper foot gear to be playing a sport like basketball. So that's a project, that's a kind of project or approach that someone might want to use if you don't necessarily have like a huge team you can build, or a lot of like money you necessarily can potentially raise from the community, but you want to form like a strategic partnership with a local business, or even, in this case, Nike, just one of the most largest companies in the world. So you never know, and these things are good avenues to pursue as well.
Mhm. Yeah, so just to kind of give an overview of sort of the basics of what we covered today. So, first up is just setting yourself apart academically. So, really kind of focusing your courses, especially those advanced courses and honors courses, towards your intended area of study. So, if you're not the strongest STEM candidate, you might want to focus your honors on the humanities. And of course, like we said, like not pursuing course rigor at the expense of your grades. Um, Setting up a manageable testing plan, so figuring out whether you want to take the SAT or the ACT, and then from there, kind of setting it up so that you could definitely finish those exams by the end of your junior year, therefore freeing up the summer after that for your college applications, and just having that sort of that weight off your shoulders so that you can still excel academically your senior fall too. Next is quality over quantity of your extracurriculars. So this all goes back to finding your hook and making sure that your activities are tailored toward that hook, and that you're not spreading yourself too thin over a bunch of different things that you might not even be that interested in the first place. Next is brainstorming your own self-started passion projects. So, like we got into with these examples, passion projects can create incredible impact. It's not something that every student does. Like, let's say joining a club, which automatically does set an applicant apart. When it comes time for applying to college, and also just seeing the kind of impact you can make. Like, it's pretty incredible being able to, like that example Jane brought up, like finding somebody on LinkedIn and sending them an email and telling them about your project, and having somebody really sort of give your project momentum, and seeing that impact in front of you is definitely a rewarding feeling that our we see our students enjoy. um, and then next is making the most of your summers. So we went through, what makes a compelling summer, and what doesn't make a compelling summer. And especially the summer after your freshman year, you have the luxury of exploration. You want to use that time to at least get closer to what that hook might be. Okay, great. So now we'll open up for just any questions you guys might have. You can go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll go ahead and try to answer any questions. Um, Okay. Are there no questions at all?
Nothing yet. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe people are typing. You never know. It takes people different. I guess give like another minute or so.
Definitely, we'll give a few minutes if you guys have any questions about anything we asked about, or anything that you guys just might in general be curious about with the college process. Definitely happy to answer them. Yeah. Another option as well. So we have an email here. It's just weehawken at commandeducation.com. If you guys do have any questions after this presentation, or at any point, you guys can go ahead and submit them to that email, and someone will get back to you. Okay, I think we have no takers for any. Oh, okay,
Oh,
there we go.
got
Okay,
one.
so Callie's asking, so what is the best way to find an internship program? So in my experience, the internet is definitely the best way to do this. I found incredible opportunities for my students there. And of course, there's websites that kind of compile internships where it's just, sort of like listing them. If you just Google, for example, science research internships in New York. You'll kind of see everything that comes up. A lot of those programs will also be attached to a college. So last year, one of my students got into the Hofstra research program, and she really, really loved that. There's also the cold emailing route, which we spoke about, and something that we've seen work wonders many, many times. And so, if there's a really cool company that you're interested in, or some sort of like nonprofit organization, for example, and it doesn't look like they're offering opportunities to high school students, it never hurts just to send them an email, or even just LinkedIn, honestly, is a great resource for that. If you find kind of executives at that company or directors at that company that you might want to get involved in, you could just send them an email or send them a message on LinkedIn and just inquire about it. I've had students submit like dozens of emails and not hear back from most of them, but the ones that they do hear back from, again, are the only ones they needed. And so it does take a little bit of time and effort with the cold emailing route, but that's kind of a way to potentially secure an opportunity that isn't really available anywhere else, and is kind of customized for you. But yeah, other than that, honestly, Google is going to be your friend here. You can also consult potentially like your school's guidance office and see kind of what resources maybe students take advantage of, or have in past years. Of course, yeah. Any other questions at all about internships, passion projects, college applications, or extracurriculars? think we've got no questions. But if you guys do have any questions, so this email on the screen here, weehawken at commandeducation.com. Feel free to submit your questions there. But thank you guys so much for attending. We hope you guys found this helpful and that, this sort of helps give you just a bird's eye view of the next few years and how to make the most of them. Like Jane said, just having the ability to really focus on the things you love and not spreading yourself too thin because you think you need to do everything to be competitive, which is definitely not the case. But yeah, thank you guys so much for making the time, and we wish you guys the best of luck in this process.
Thanks, everyone.